That's really important.
Or
We can go live, okay?
And we'll need Jamie T to panel if you haven't already.
Already MJ, I'm considered co-host.
Oh, all right. Perfect.
All right, call our meeting to order at 6:34. First order on the agenda is the agenda review. Does anybody have any changes to the agenda, comments to the agenda? Nope. All right, any public comments? We've got the rules of public participation right there. We have a few members of the audience. All right, sorry, attendees. If you want to participate, please raise your hand. If not, we will move on. I don't see any hands. No participation in the audience here. All right.
That is true.
Too hot. All right, why don't we move to the report? So we've got the PTO report. Sure. There's Aaron. So Aaron's on attendee who will be doing that. Right, Aaron, there you are.
Great,
You're here.
I'm here. Thank you.
All
Yep.
right. Thank you. Nice meeting you. I gave a quick overview of your email at the last meeting. So this is the first live one. So welcome.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, so just reporting for MCS, we had popsicles on the playground at the open house on August 29th, and that was a big success. Usually we just have that for new students, but this year we decided to open it up to everyone, and it was a nice warm day. And so we went through 200 popsicles very quickly and got a really nice response from the community. So that was really great. On the 30th, the first day of school, we had the welcome back breakfast that was indoors because of the rain. And that again was a really nice turnout. We're having a little bit of difficulty communicating with the school. It sounds like the MCS email distribution system is having a little bit of trouble communicating with the entire school body, and so not all of our communications are going out, but I know they're working hard to fix that. So my limitations there with whatever the school is able to get out, and then sending out communication through membership directory. Our first PTO meeting for MCS will be in the multi at the school at 8:15 a.m. on Thursday, September 14th. We'll be holding PTO meetings every Thursday, once a month throughout the school year. We're going to alternate mornings with evenings, and we'll be in person in the fall and the spring, and then we will move to Zoom over the winter months. So we're working on our PTO membership drive, which is through the directory. And so we've got a number of people who've handed in their membership dues already, and we're still trying to get the word out about that. So yeah, that's it for August and first part of September.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Is the email system new? Is there something that changed?
It's not so much the email system as our school. We used to have a system called School Messenger, which has been replaced now with a similar system that has a relationship with Power School, which is our student information management system.
Okay, so that rolled out this fall.
Right. I sent the message out to the community last week, and I just tried to send out a text message because that's one of the reasons we switched over. It has text messaging as an option, and so far I haven't received my own text, so I'm assuming nobody else has. But it looks like it's rolling in the system, so we'll have to continue to troubleshoot.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you, Aaron. Please reach out if you have any, to me and stuff now as we get going here. If you have any questions or comments or whatever. All right, we will move on. We have There is no select board liaison here.
Well, I'm supposed to do that, but the select board is meeting tonight, so I've got nothing to report. I wasn't able to go to their last meeting either because we had a meeting, so
Okay.
who knows? Someone was in to fix the boiler today, though, so.
The only question there, Tammy, I think we were gonna, maybe in her report, we'll just make a note, see about the tax payments, because I know Jean was getting a little stressed there with regards to whether Hanover's gonna have to blow this.
Yeah, I don't know
So
for that.
see if that was that done. All right, any other, I think that's it for our reports. Our business requiring discussion. The infamous AP approver.
Does that mean I'm done?
You're never done.
Really?
I would run who are the current approvers?
This table,
And you guys have both,
SAU and Norwich.
SAU and Norwich. Okay. So
We can shift to this table if you want. That's fine.
Sure.
Okay, so it's, yes, it's both you, how did we do it before? It was SAU and Norwich.
Well,
and
and so
I just did Norwich.
I think the way that it's been working is every time there's been a switch, we also switch whether Hanover did Dresden or Norwich did Dresden, right? So right now it's Norwich and SAU, Hanover, Dresden. If both boards switch,
Okay,
then that's typically the time where we switch, and then it would be Norwich, Dresden, Hanover, SAU.
okay, so right now then we're gonna stick with our Norwich SAU. So when you guys see the Norwich payroll and the
Will
SAU.
you alert Heather?
There's one that just came through yesterday, and Lisa and I will take care of that.
Yeah,
Okay,
And,
I did earlier today.
and both of us need to sign off on it.
by email, we just say I approve, and
I've
it's
seen,
very
I've
easy.
seen you guys.
And they're very amenable to questions too. Like if you don't understand something, they're very kind about explaining what it is.
Jay,
I was gonna offer, Michael, if you haven't done it, I don't think you've done it before yet. No, I've seen it. Right, if you want to, you can find a convenient time to schedule a visit to the business office, they can run you through it. Other than these.
all right. Our next item is the facilities condition audit that I think Jamie will be, Jamie, you're going to do that. So obviously, as most people know, we had all the 4 buildings were audited for the Norwich folks. If you want to see all the audits for all the 4 buildings, they're on the last meeting, SAU 70. Special meeting from August 26th, second, I think, 22nd. All 4 reports plus the summary report that was given by the auditor is in there. And this one here is just specific to Marion Cross. So Jamie?
Hi, good evening. Yeah, and I will say that with the approval that we just discussed in the aforementioned item, I'll send out the refresher in case I didn't send it out. I don't remember, to both Lily and Michael, that just kind of goes through what account numbers are and all, what the process is. Okay, so I'll send that right tonight, so I don't forget. So yes, the Norwich report, we brought the audit, the facilities audit or facilities assessment reports to the SAU board first in August. One of the persons on the Bureau Veritas team did a very high level overview with a PowerPoint for us, trying to hit on some of the highlights. They're very long reports. Tony, myself, and Jay have reviewed them, but we've reviewed them, multiple times and asked questions. And we still have more questions coming in and questions to ask. It's a lot to digest when we don't spend all of our days working on those types of reports and or issues. In speaking with Tony, we decided to also ship them out to experts in the field of school and town and actually hotel management, a company that does both energy efficient investment projects, and they also do just regular renovation type projects in both the state of New Hampshire and Vermont. They've done work on our Hanover School District. They've done work at Norwich School District for us. I worked with them on 3 different projects at my former school district, which included 11 different schools. They're experts in the field. I don't think Tony or Nora ever claimed to be. And so we thought, with the magnitude of the reports and the amount of, interest from the community, which is awesome, in the content, that it would be in our best interest for everyone involved to engage with energy efficient investments to review them for us. Because they're New England based. Bureau Veritas is across the world. They're huge. And so we'll be meeting with them on I think it's the 19th. We looked at a couple different dates, but we'll be meeting with them internally, Tony and myself. Jay's always welcome, but his schedule is very busy as well, to go over, some of the content. Obviously, a couple-hour meeting is not long enough in order to do that, but we wanted to bring it to experts to review so that they could help us map out some paths that might be available to us. The company that I referenced also has their pulse on almost all of the grant availabilities in New Hampshire and Vermont. I don't think they do stuff in Maine, although they are starting to expand into Maine. They wrote they helped secure the $375,000-ish that put in all of our HVAC units on the roof there during, the COVID year. So they're very well versed in grant availability and/or, different types of funding sources. So I will tell you that. I know that there's a lot of folks on both of the sustainability groups that are very interested in the data and wanting to help move forward. Because of the delay with the permitting from the state of Vermont for our septic installation, we still haven't heard back yet or the permit hasn't been released. They're still working through, I'm sure, some of the placement data and questions. The flooding in Montpelier absolutely did not help our cause. It kind of redirected a lot of the folks who have experts in the field there to other problems internally with the state's infrastructure. So anyway, because of that delay and the fact that we probably won't break ground, largely break ground till after next spring, Tony and I will also be discussing what we might be able to do, hopefully, in light of the fact that we have an oil tank that's aging. And it's not an oil tank that meets new specifications if you were going to put a tank in the ground. I do not believe it's double walled. And so because we're going to be digging in that area, and that was part of our renovation project, we are going to try to look into what some alternative sources might be, keeping in mind that our boilers are not, they're not ancient and not working. They're working, and some of them are newer than others. But because of the cost, and I think I just froze a little bit, so I'm just going to put down my video, sorry. Because of the cost of oil right now and the volatility in the markets and the fact that, there are other energies that are cheaper, propane's one of them, and you can put dual fuel burners in furnaces of certain ages. So we're going to be looking into a lot of different things in a very short period of time with that respect. And then really the bulk of this report was to bring us to a place where we could understand what the present conditions are of all of the different areas of our buildings, right? All the plant and the mechanicals and the, you know, every little piece of what puts all of our asset together, so that we could then take that data and try to make informed decisions as we move forward, so that we can take care of that asset appropriately and also manage the costs, right, as we move forward into the future. So it's a great report. It's a large report. I think what they showed as the most immediate need is that the roofs are aging, and we should really look at addressing them earlier than later. I spoke with Tony, and I do not believe that we're having terrible roofing issues. You know, every year, every one of our buildings that we have has some small little things that happen, and we address them and take care of them promptly. We did work through some of our issues when we put the new HVAC units on the roof in that area. So we have done some upgrades. We have not replaced the roof completely. And, you know, we're looking at different ages, right? Because of the different ages of the buildings. So it's a lot of data. We would welcome, if folks have questions, to please email them to us, Tony and myself, and Jay, if you want, if they could email our questions into us or invite us to meet with them in different groups, that's great too. And so we can come, you know, kind of do a question and answer document, which would be great. So as questions come in and we get answers to those questions or can expand on any information, we'll share it with everybody. I think that's probably the best thing to do in the short term. And again, we'll look at 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, you know, as far out as we want to go as a group, keeping in mind that the whole entire funding stream in the state of Vermont is changing, and none of us are completely sure what that's going to look like. And so I know it can be very frustrating for folks that we don't move fast. Hopefully they don't think we're moving at a snail's pace, but we want to go slow in order to do the right thing at the right time. So I would ask for some patience, which I know everybody's been great about this year with the 2 projects that we're already underway. So that's my spiel for tonight about the facilities condition assessment.
Perfect. Are there any questions, comments? Yeah.
One question, a couple of comments, and Jamie, this is not directly related to the facilities audit, but it made me think about this. What is the current status of PCD testing for Marion Cross?
We're not mandated, I don't think, Neil, until next fiscal year.
Do we have any guesses as to how that might turn out?
I believe I asked Tony that question, and I know I have notes on it on my desk. I'm sorry. I do not think that he felt we had an issue. I know we've done all the lead testing and we've taken care of those things. I will have to discuss that with him again. I don't remember him having a sense of urgency or concern, or a heightened sense of concern regarding that.
Okay. I did look into this with Tony as well. When they first came out with this program, it was quite the buzz among the superintendents in Vermont. The feeling was that a lot of the renovation that was done here was done after PCBs were outlawed, and that the older part of the building, he felt pretty confident that the caulking and that sort of thing has been replaced. So we weren't even originally on the list because we didn't fall within the dates that that they prescribed. But based on the older part of the building, they added us to the list and we're way toward the end of it. So,
all right. That does it provides me a little bit of pause, right? Especially, and I actually think would have been preferred to be earlier in the testing cycle rather than later, right? Because if we don't find out until the end of the testing cycle that we've got a problem, basically, it's like the entire ship turns and faces and focuses on that problem. And anything else that was in the strategic plan of this facilities condition report that we were chasing after gets dropped. Unless something magical happens in the legislature during this next session and they decide to put money towards it. So far, they have been unwilling to, unfortunately, to do that. And so I just want to put that on our radar because it's not in the facilities report, but I know of another school that like literally weeks before opening day discovered that they had a PCB issue and had to immediately address it. And kids are in classrooms under tents outside.
And another one completely shut down and had to hold high school, still has to hold high school in the mall in Burlington.
Yeah, so it's one of those things that, you know, you think you're okay until you're not. And with the testing levels set so low, below any sort of national standard, you know, a little bit of caulking maybe might be all that we need to trip it, right? And so that's my concern related to that. The other thing that I would add too, though, is, so the second thing is we have not had any school construction aid in Vermont since 2010. There is a task force that should be working on that right now. So a task force that was set up through legislation this last session. It's supposed to provide a report in January of 24. So we want to keep that on our radar as well too, to see what the recommendation is coming out of that. Because I think we might want to make sure that we're talking to our reps and senators, that if the recommendation is to bring back school construction aid, that we want to be like, yes, please.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that I will add for folks, and I'm sure that the board already knows this, right? But any debt service that we incur through pursuit of some of these projects gets added to our per pupil spending, right? And so that's another reason why I would push hard to see what would happen with the school construction aid, especially if they decide to somehow set it up so that it may not have an impact or as much of an impact on per pupil spending. So.
Procedural question, which is, I'm a little confused as to why Jamie is spearheading this and not Tony here tonight. What's the rationale behind that?
So procedurally, Tony answers to me. I'm in charge of 5 departments, including custodial maintenance, food service, transportation, and finance. So Tony's more than willing to come and discuss everything with you. I think that we're hoping after the next meeting we have with the EEI that we'll have more information to share. And at that point, you know, he will come in. He's been working every night with the schools opening. So when I think I can handle it, I do, instead of trying to bring him in when I know that he's putting in 1 million hours. He's a working manager. So he's had his head in a boiler, I think, for days. So amongst other things, but yeah, he should be in at our next meeting in October. We'll have more information.
You're doing a great job. I just didn't know if this was something that was like extra added to your plate, but I know that you have a very full plate already.
I appreciate that. Thank you. But I do also have a background in this.
All right.
I just wanted to back up to Neil's comment or observation and just ask the board if we're concerned, if I agree with Neil, that if 2 years from now, we have finally had our PCB testing and discover that we've shut down a gym or close off a wing of the building, it is going to be significant. It's been significant in several districts already, to the south of us, I think St. Johnsbury. It's really, really disruptive. So it may be the sort of thing that we want to look into having some testing done of our own.
I would say maybe, right? I think I like where you're headed with this, but I might check with like or whoever is spearheading the testing to find out whether or not there's an ability for us to move up in the testing. I'm guessing no. huh?
Well, I'm shaking my head no, because it was because I inquired that we even got on the list.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I say that because there was some money set aside for the testing, right?
Right.
So, I would, yeah, there's a great answer.
Seems like something that we would want to know, but then I guess the problem is it doesn't seem like there's. If, for example, we're under the federal limits, but we're over the Vermont limits, we still have to go remediate, they can shut down and put people in tents or do it. I'm not very familiar with the PCB and what the sources are and what our level of rate, I don't know much about.
lighting ballast, caulk, alk, every kind of material that was used in construction prior to like the early
Yeah.
80s.
And then it gets into the air, like the caulking and
Yeah.
gas.
Yeah, I think I might. It might deserve some further discussion and some thought, right? Because one of the concerns that the sort of the collective we, and I mean, like school boards in Vermont had during this last legislative session is that Senate Education went all in on the PCB thing and they took a micro focused approach to that thing without looking at the broader issue of school construction, right? And so there may be instances here where, if you were to find PCBs, if you looked at it in the context of our broader facilities engagement thing, like maybe we were planning on addressing that, through some other effort. Because now we've got schools that have been finding PCBs and then immediately need to address the remediation piece when what maybe they really ought to be doing is thinking about building a new school, right? And so it's kind of, I think they took a very myopic approach to this thing. And so part of me would be a little bit concerned that if we did testing on the early side and found something that might be good, helping us figure out like where in the context of things do we want to put our monies and what needs to be addressed. But at the same time, like once you find those PCBs, you got to do something, right? And I'm not suggesting that we stick our head in the sand and not address the issue. But given the information that we've got about the age of our building, when it was constructed, the materials that were used, we think that we're likely needing not to have an issue. I balance that against, all of the other things that we've seen in the facilities. Like I don't know if there's any great answer here, but maybe we need to think about it a little bit.
It is, with the facilities report, I think, is that there's nothing like immediate, right? Like there's nothing that came out of that.
No,
It's a huge.
but if you're gonna start to entertain this idea that we're gonna embark on a big project in 3 to 5 years, and we're gonna have to bond for it or borrow for it. And then suddenly, you find out the PCB thing is here, and we need to address that, then. Then you're kind of stuck. So, yeah, like I said, I raised the question, but I don't know that I have any answers for it, right?
Yes, a question I have for Neil or Jay is, are there other school districts doing exploratory testing prior to their turn of the line?
I'm not aware of any. That's not to say that no one is, but this has been a big issue for us, just because of exactly what Neil said. There didn't seem to be a lot of sort of forward thinking in terms of what do we do once we find them.
Yeah.
And so we've had communities where the school's been shut down and they had to find either alternative locations or actually just not hold school for a while, or not use whole big chunks of buildings.
I mean, for me, in the absence of like encouragement from public health officials or something that we know about that would cause us to explore it early. I would say perhaps time spent contingency planning. Hey, if we're told that our building's going to shut down, immediately we kind of know that this is the direction we're going in. Or if we lose a whole school or a gym, this is the direction we're going in. Not to minimize the issue of the risk, when I spoke to Tom Camden prior to putting my hat in the ring here, is one of the 3 big issues I questioned about, because it seemed like the legislature made a strong statement before thinking through the practical ramifications of how to operate a school or remediating PCBs. But to me, in the absence of some compelling reason to go faster, I would, prefer to spend our time thinking about contingency plans if we end up having to engage in that type of mitigation.
Okay, Jamie, with the hand up.
Jamie?
Sure, thank you. I appreciate that, Michael. I will add this to our discussion with the team that we're gonna meet with to see, because they deal with a lot of schools. I mean, they've got a lot of projects open right now in Vermont, all around us. So I will broach that question with them to see if they have any suggested courses of action that we might be able to take. And also to come up with, like you said, a contingency plan. Our gym was relatively new. It would, if we had a problem, it would be in our older sections. But thank you. It's good stuff.
And maybe, I don't know, I don't disagree, maybe it's more, not so much more the contingency plan of what we do with students, but the contingency plan of what the likely outcomes would be for remediation. And unfortunately, I guess that comes down to what the problem is, but I mean, when people are finding this, at least in our school, unfortunately, it seems like something that we probably should know sooner than later, because it seems to me to be a kind of a binary discussion, because if we launch a big, huge some campaign and we find this, then we have to stop. We might as well just know before we even launch on that thing. And if we find a big issue, well, then maybe we end up doing something bigger. I mean, it seems to me that at the end of the day, we're going to be remediating it. We're not going to be rebuilding the school. So,
And I think the issue for me is the weight piece has two pieces to it. One is knowing that the state of our building would indicate that we likely don't have a problem. And two, the additional time then allows the legislature to do the right thing and put money for every school into the budget so that it's covered, right? Otherwise, right now, all of these other schools in Vermont are having to pay for this out of their own local budgets, which I don't think is the right way to go. So by having that additional time, you give the legislature this ability to do the right the wrong, do the right thing this next session for this.
okay.
And we will be advocating strongly for that.
Okay. All right, I think we have that one. Next item is any other comments? No, good. All right, any public comments on that? No.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Thanks, Matt Walker,
Yes.
64 Carpenter Street. Does the audit, does that change the timeline for projects that are underway now? Jamie talked about the oil tank. I didn't know how the oil tank related to the audit or things that were approved previously and are big projects on the school. Does it, because I know she said they're looking at taking their time, doing it right. Does that affect prior projects or in works, or? That's my question. I couldn't hear that in that report.
So Jamie, I don't know if you heard, but the question was, is there anything in the report that's kind of changing our timeline with our existing projects? And the answer is no. You're on mute.
Sorry. No, because once you go out to warrant article to bond or borrow for a project, then the project, that project has already been set in motion, in forward motion. Nothing that came out of the report did touch on a couple of items that we are already embarking on taking care of, which was interesting to us. But it will not change any of the direction that we're taking currently with the 2 projects that are underway, or 3 projects that are underway. So the only part of what may change a little bit is if we can figure out a way that we might be able to not have to put another oil tank in the ground, right? And that would be the only change on the septic project, because it had money for removal and reinstallation of tanks. So if there was a way that we could, because when or if you discuss or decide depending on whether we can figure out room, because we sit on a lot of ledge. If we could put a dual fuel burner in, which is, we know we can, you need to put a small tank farm in if you go to propane and oil. And so when you put a small propane tank farm in, you don't own the tanks. The company that you sign with owns the tanks. So there's not a purchase price for tanks when you do that. But we're the early discussions on that. I know folks are hoping that we would look towards some other different renewable, sustainable energy type of heat sources. And that'll be a part of the discussion. I just don't know that within our time frame of what we've written that specific warrant article for, or warning article, excuse me, in Vermont, for, that we would have, that we would change that course right away. I hope that answers your question.
So from the budgeting too, right, we've got the facilities budget. I think Jamie isn't really giving herself enough credit either. I mean, if I understand right, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jamie, but you and Tony took on yourselves a few years ago to kind of do your own kind of 5-year capital improvement plan. So I think that luckily not, because of that, I think we fared at least better than I expected when I was reading the report. And I think it's really come down to when we do the budgets that, we've got the hundreds of whatever grand in there every year for capital improvements, and whether we flip that over to a roof or something that this thing highlighted as a higher need than something else. I think that's my understanding. We'll kind of use this as our, course. And then, like you said, I did, just so everyone knows, I know the Norwich Energy Committee or folks sent us a letter about asking about the oil tank, and just so we're crystal clear, the idea is that oil tank is old, and Jamie's idea is let's get it out of the ground while we have the ground dug up, put a propane tank in. At least that's, I think, cleaner and probably better for now. And then whether we move to something like heat pumps or, that's a bigger discussion, which is part of the energy audit, and they have an estimate for heat pumps and solar and all sorts of things in there, which is what this company EEI would also be helping us decide. And I think frankly, we would need to do a better job of communicating the budget, how that's going to work, than what the town did with the $2 million bond that we tried to approve and got shot down. And I mean, that was, for me, I think this is all about communicating how much these things cost and how you do them and what the payback is, and getting our community buy-in on it. Yeah, sorry.
I don't want to make our last half hour move, but apparently they have not updated the list. And we're still not on it. Okay. So right now, we don't worry about PCB.
Okay.
I've still added it to our discussion so we can be informed.
Yeah.
And Jane, my only one question on that, so the report gave Marion Cross, so for folks that are concerned, and the kids and some of the high school students and the environmental club, I mean, the Marion Cross school actually pretty well from that. We scored like a 90, and that's largely because of our participation in a local solar farm. Is that how we got that high? I mean,
For some of our electricity offset, yes, the school district does participate in one of the solar farms. We also had changed out, which is interesting, to low flush toilets quite some time ago, and also with the, I believe, the faucets. So, our consumption of water has gone down considerably since what it used to be prior to Tony and I coming. So it's all of those things, Garrett, that have, plus we have the small solar panels on the side of the building, over the overhangs. So it's all of those things they take into consideration.
yeah, if you look to like page 31, it gave us like kind of an Energy Star rating, and it was actually surprisingly good. So, all right, thank you, Matt. All right, Jamie, the meal charge policy.
Sure. As many people know, we just started participating in the National School Lunch program after the Universal Free Meals Act was ratified by the Vermont State Legislature. They removed the ability to opt out. So, like it or not, we're in. And so because we were in on our very first year, we underwent our very first audit of the National School Lunch Program and how we deliver it, and to make sure that we're in compliance with all of the rules and regulations. So one of the items that was, I don't know if it was a finding or not, it might have been a finding, but that's not a bad thing. It just means that you have to update it. So the policy that we had in place did not meet the federal guidelines and state guidelines. So this is a policy from them, from the state of Vermont, that it's kind of a plug and play. That's probably why you see different colors. And this will bring us in compliance with our audit. So if you have any questions, I mean, I'm happy to answer them. It's pretty self-explanatory. Right now, there's really not an issue because all the meals are free, right? So it's kind of funny because you have to have it and it has to be in place, but it's really not relevant at the moment.
Jamie, how recently did you get this? Did this come from AOE?
Yes. Yeah, within the last 6 months, probably.
Okay, because I did a quick check of this against the SBA model policy, and the model policy right now is under review. And it's under review because back in 2021, the legislature tasked the AOE with basically rewriting this policy. And we're still working with AOE on that. And I think the anticipation is it would be done sometime this fall. And so I was just curious on timing, if we got this language from AOE, and I wonder if this isn't necessary immediately, if maybe we pause until the AOE issues the new recommended model policy for this?
It is requested immediately.
Okay.
It was requested to be ratified in August, and I missed that meeting because we're not in compliance with our audit. So I can bring it back.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only thing is, I think we're probably gonna want to revisit it once AOE finally issues their model policy for this, and just see where the two are different and then reconcile any changes then.
Absolutely.
Because I understand, because we offer free school lunches to everybody, this whole policy is just kind of, because this is a.
Well, I think this brings us in compliance with the federal program,
Right.
which is required.
But we offer free lunch in Vermont
Through I mean, Sean can.
anyway, you don't need to waste time on this, but we did get a question about, I think we had a question about kids getting, how they can apply, I think, or get what, free lunches over once they move to Hanover, and the answer is, they can't. Sorry, you're now in New Hampshire.
Well, but that's not completely true. They can apply in New Hampshire. We
You
don't
apply.
participate. Yeah, you have to apply because New Hampshire doesn't have universal free meals. But because our schools don't participate in National School Lunch Program on the New Hampshire side, if somebody fills out, and they're all online, they're on our website, if somebody fills out the documents and they are designated free or reduced, all of our students are free. We don't distinguish between free or reduced. In Hanover and Dresden, if a student qualifies for either of the thresholds, they are free.
They qualify, you're here, you just get it no matter what.
Correct. Or if they're a direct cert. There are direct certifications also that come out. I'm sorry, Sean, I'm almost done. There are direct certifications that come out if folks participate in either Medicare, Medicaid, SNAP, TANF, any other type of federal programming for assistance. And so those folks don't have to fill one out. They will get a letter that says they're directly certified.
I have 2 questions. I know that this applies to school lunch. Does it apply to the school milk? The only way that we students get charged is if they're getting a milk at only for their meal. So that's the only way they could rack up a bill. So Jamie, does this apply also to kids who get milk only?
It would if they don't, and we had talked about that. It would because they no longer offer the free milk program because they offer universal free meals. So if a student wanted to have milk only, we were encouraging people to take, in breakfast 2 of the 3 or at lunch 3 of the 5 so that we can charge it as a meal and they don't have to pay for it.
And my second question is, I wonder if I could collection of unpaid meal debt section.
Yeah.
It would be such a small amount of people that would fall in this category. I wonder if rather than getting collections agencies involved, if we could have a fund that might just take care of a few children who would fall into that category. I think that kids who may fall into the category of having unpaid bills would be the ones who probably need things the most. I'm wondering if we could just consider something a little different in that collection of meal debt section.
I'd have to have a discussion on that. Because I mean, that's even in our meal charging policy in Dresden, Hanover.
New policy on that, we spent a lot of time on this on policy committee like a year ago, trying to soften that a little bit because the language was quite like, we'll send it to a collection agency. It was a little bit odd, so it
Well,
did change already. But
if you want to strike it, we'll strike it. I don't know if we have the ability to strike it is my concern.
because this is a remote thing.
Maybe we have the ability to do something in an alternative. Maybe we can leave this policy, but it could get, if it gets to a certain point, maybe we have a fund that we could go to. I just would hate this. I'm thinking of people who may fall into this category. I think they don't need a collection agency for $25. No.
It's very rare that we do that, but my 8 years here, not in Norwich, we have gone to collection agency on a couple of bills. We don't normally do it at $25. I've got a couple right now that are up in the 300 range.
Well, I think, again, Sean, I think if we look at, again, maybe I'm just gonna try to solve the problem real time, but if we look at the bullets, it basically says that they'll contact household, building, principal may contact local services office if they refuse to provide. If the household refuses to pay for the student meals. So it does seem like there are a few blocks in place here before it actually goes to the collection as far as like trying to resolve it. But
I'll take it back. If that's such a big deal right now, I don't want to try to answer the questions and wordsmith this on the fly. Okay, so let's table it. I'm good.
yeah. Well, but Jane, this isn't Vermont. I mean, this is a Vermont state thing, right? So why don't we just pass it as is and then we can figure out that, yes.
Yeah, I don't want to belabor the point, but I am wondering about the Vermont free meals program, which it's my understanding that there's Vermont middle schools and high schools. It's still universal free meals, correct? So like if you're at Hartford High School, you get a universal free meal, right? I understand that we're going by New Hampshire rules because that's where our kids are, and I'm just wondering. And there's two kind of parts of this. There's like the legal part of it. Is it legally the right thing to do? And then there's sort of like, is it the right thing to do? And I don't know the answer to that, but I just wondered. It just feels strange for Vermont kids. If they're supposed to be covered to not be covered, just because they're going to school across the river. And again, I don't want to wrap up debts and I don't want to add more money to the budget, but I'm wondering if there's a way we can get creative, so.
Clarifying question, I think they can't be covered because the New Hampshire schools don't participate in national school lunch.
Yeah, I understand that, I just, there's something about it that doesn't sit right with me. So and again, I don't know legally or morally or ethically, or, I'm not trying to I'm not trying to implode the school system or the lunch program over this. I'm just kind of wondering if there was a way, yeah, to do something.
So two things. One is, I mean, we do need to have two readings of policy before we pass it. So I mean, if Jamie wants to go back and take a look at some potential changes, I think that, you know, tonight counts as a first reading. So I mean, it was necessary to do anyway, right? You know, there's even a possibility too that AOE will issue model policy in this area between now and when we get together again. So it might actually solve some of the questions that we have tonight. And then finally, to Lisa's comment, while I completely understand where you're coming from, the challenge that you've got with that is you can't start to pick and choose which things you want to try to change. Because I'll tell you right now, right, the kids that are graduating from Hanover High are graduating based on New Hampshire's graduation requirements and not Vermont's. And so we need to be very careful. It's a slippery slope to go down as to which things you want to try to opt out of and which ones you want to try to opt into, because the two states are different. So.
Okay, I guess I can amend my question is just to make sure that the Vermont kids for whom this would be a program that would be beneficial to them when they cross the river, can we make it as easy as possible for them to receive this same sort of benefit as if their middle school or high school were in Vermont? But I don't know, I just.
But they can based on need.
Yeah, I mean, that, I think we're already doing it as easy as possible.
They already can based on their need, and that's the way, as I understand it, used to be here. Before
Right.
we implemented this, everyone gets a free thing.
No, I understand, I just,
So,
there's something about not singling kids out that I appreciate about the Vermont program, so.
Not to belabor it, I am doing my own sort of independent research on the differences between what's available to our New Hampshire kids in Dresden and what's available to our Vermont kids, and what the difference is. There are things like residents of New Hampshire have access to free online courses through VEHI.
Right.
And even though our kids are going to school in Hanover, they're not eligible. So, and there are things that work both ways on that. So we have a program in Vermont that is run through our adult education program, Vermont Adult Learning, that allows a kid that would be struggling or having a hard time attending school actually finish their Hanover High School diploma by doing work with Vermont Adult Learning. But it's not open to New Hampshire kids. So we've got a number of those things that we're trying to identify to sort of put together a chart of where are those differences.
yeah. All right. Onward, any other comments? All right, the policy. This is our second reading. This is the reading, regarding travel and reimbursement. Did I have any comments on this?
So this is the changing of the regulations for the policy, not a change to the policy itself. It was
Okay.
requested that we bring it, even though regulations don't have to be voted on. When the regulation changes were made at, I think Dresden, I think we brought them to each of the other districts this summer, or this, I don't know, it might have been August. It was either July or August. But we've updated the regulations. That's why it's a -R.
Good. Anybody have any comments on this? That's why it wasn't a policy. Committee policy. Okay, are there any updates that we need to be aware of, Jamie, or is it, I mean, reading through this, I think it looks like it's pretty standard reimbursement.
So the updates were that we changed the GSA allowances to be higher because GSA rates are not offered to school districts and towns, only the federal government. GSA rates run about 40% less than regular RAC rates. So it has an either or. and we upped that to $250 or the GSA stated rate times 140%. That's one of the biggest changes. There's a bunch of changes through the regulation, but some of the other ones were, we have folks who don't like to fly. And so instead of having to fly somewhere, if they want to drive, it has a formula whereby if you want to drive to Florida to go to a conference instead of flying, and take your leisure, whatever the flight would have been for the point in time that you were going to go, we would reimburse up to that costs. So it has, we won't reimburse every mile if you choose to drive 2,000, but if you choose to drive to Florida and back in the middle of the summer because you want to take your time or visit or whatever you want to do, I don't care, as long as it doesn't cost us more than it would have cost us if you had flown down. And it explains how that works. I did this a while ago, so I have to stop and think what some of the other changes were. Those are two of the bigger ones that we made changes on. The meals we made changes on about consuming meals within a 24-hour period must not exceed the total rate, instead of nickeling and diming somebody about how much you spend for breakfast, how much you spend for lunch, how much you spend for dinner. It takes a ton of time for our finance department to have to go through not only our finance department, but also the administrative assistants who have to check these before they get, put in the system for reimbursement. So we decided to make that in the aggregate. Some of the other things, we made it clear that if folks wanted to do a rental, if multiple people were going, instead of renting 5 different hotel rooms, if it was cheaper to rent one vacation home where everybody had their own room, then that's okay. You can use the base rates. And then what else changed?
I think we're good.
Yeah, I think those are the bulk of them.
All right. Any other comments on that? No. All right, I want to move to the big dog of the night here, the budget guidelines. You may
It's all you do.
kick that off.
It's all you.
Neil very kindly nominated me to be the chair of the Norwich Budget Committee unexpectedly on Friday afternoon.
I think it was very much expected.
Nice Friday afternoon move there.
Yeah.
So these are the guidelines. It's based on the quick model. The quick, we basically have broken, basically what we've done here is we've tried to come up with the percent based on the quick model. I'm looking at Shawnee's looking already at me with evil eyes saying, how are we gonna rank it? But I think that this is kind of our recommendation of the quick model. What we have done is we've kind of said, okay, the quick model, which again is quick, it's based on the new teachers association, teachers contracts, and then other, items that have been put in there with regards to our current staff, and then some CPI increases for other expenses, is showing a potential increase of about just over 7.5%. And then we talked about, the reason that we kind of put the K through 6 is that is the bulk. That's basically 80% of our budget is basically the programming. So education, special education, regular education, special education, student support services, and general administrative services. Those are, that's really the bulk of it. So that's the quick model showing about 5.5%. So that's why we put a range there. And obviously the total budget, also in bold, we've included what the other items are, because this year we do have the debt service that's come on, so we kind of wanted to make sure that we were splitting those two components out a bit as far as giving some guidance. As you can see here, if you read down onto it, Jamie did a very nice job summarizing the fact that this now reflects the new contracts. So I understand too, so that because we were delayed in that, there's a catch up in this one too, or not?
Yeah, so what happened was with teacher negotiations, we failed to reach an agreement with the teachers for the 22-23 and 23-24 budget years until this past April. And then we just had a recent agreement again in August.
Right.
so those prior budgets, in some sense, benefited from that lack of an agreement. Those budgets included the cost of steps, so everybody moving on the step and track system, but it did not include any negotiated settlement on an increase to the base amount. So now, because those agreements were retroactive to those prior years, the budget that we're building now includes that additional amount related to the change in the base. Did I get it right, Jamie?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Good. So that's one of the reasons for the fairly substantial quick model increases. Then as you scroll further down, we've gone through, just a reminder as far as what are some of the factors, and really these factors are why we've labeled some of these suggestions for this budget season. So the factors that we've laid out here, obviously the biggest one is going to be the implementation of the new weights. You can go through here. Jamie did a great job at summarizing that as well. We also, of course, every year get a assessment from Dresden, depending on the Dresden budget. You know, some of us are on those committees, so we can drive that somewhat, but obviously that's going to also be determined on what the RMS and high school budgets need to be. Again, we do have this DLA issue, which it always factors into it, but that also is directly related to the income yield numbers as well, right? So that's how we're.
The CLA isn't related to the property and income yield numbers. They're two separate things.
Well, two different numbers, but
But they all very.
the yield is based on the CLA, because the yield is calculated on everyone being assessed at a common level first.
The
rate.
My opinion is that not quite that way. The yield is designed to make sure that collectively across the state of Vermont, we raise enough revenue in the education fund to cover all voter approved budgets in the state. The CLA is a way to adjust local towns' property values based on recent sales to make sure that the assessment is accurate. Okay.
Right. So if a CLA drops, a tax rate goes up in order to make sure that the proper amount of money is raised within the town itself.
But they both drive the tax rate.
Yes.
Certainly.
So with all that to be said, Neil also very kindly advised us that if we talk to some of the folks at the state level, that we may not know what some of these numbers are until we get into December. So thereon goes to the points on part 3, on the top of page 2. I think if there's one big message here, it's flexibility and kind of a what if scenario, so that we will be ready to act quickly if we need to make some changes. So I think this is kind of what we did in Hanover the past couple of years, where it's kind of, which I thought was a good idea, where everyone's prepared with, okay, if we need to do some reductions, what kind of reductions could be made? Some are going to be larger impacts and larger dollar amounts. Some are going to be cutting a bunch of little things that may not be worth it in the end. And again, I think that now comes down to, if you look at this, you know, how would we get to a range of these outcomes? Because we may need to quickly pivot and make some unfortunate, more difficult decisions to get to that. Yeah, because last year we actually had like a 9% Marion Cross increase, but our tax rate it ended up not being too bad because of the combination of some of what was done at the state and some of what was done at Dresden, right? So our overall tax rate, Marion Cross budget was up, I think, 9%, as I recall. But our tax rate didn't get hit that hard.
Yeah, so welcome to the fantastic world of education budgeting in the state of Vermont. There is, in my opinion only, there is no longer a direct correlation between how much you spend and what your local tax rate is. And because of that lack of correlation, the effort of building a budget or the effort of a board providing guidance to an administration to build a budget is really hard, right? And so we can provide this corridor for you guys to try to hit. But the rubber meets the road in my mind, right? December 1st, when we get the tax letter from the Vermont Department of Taxes that forecasts what the yield number will be. And December 15th, which is when AOE, at least Brad James has said he is likely to have the new equalized pupil number for Norwich. So those 2 dates are very important for us because prior to that, we're not going to have any idea what the tax rate is going to look like in this town. And that's going to be long after these guys have had a chance to develop a budget, right? So I think one of the ideas that we had in here is you've got this corridor, this range of percentage increases, but to take the time now early in the process to do a little bit of these what if scenarios so that we have the time to do due diligence on those things now and then employ them later if necessary. It's not to indicate that we think that we're going to have to do these things right now, but I'd rather do the research and the analysis and the thinking about it. I would say now when we have time, but I know nobody has time, right? I mean, it's a busy time of year all the way until the end. But maybe we've got a little bit more opportunity or a longer range of time to get these things done, to do the what ifs, so that if we do feel the need to pull the trigger on some of them, we've done the analysis work ahead of time.
Sean?
It would be helpful to be in the team here since we do the process of looking at budget reductions. In my other place of employment, when something like this came to me, usually the administration went through and made those recommendations. But I know here that hasn't worked out as well. It's just something that the board wants community input. And community forums, we want surveys to go out because what I don't want is to bring a list to you and have people feel that they didn't have a say in all the things that might come out there. And if so, you have to understand that's going to be a huge time constraint to do that. But I'll do that right, like a clear process so that we don't end up in a place where people are feeling like they didn't get a say and weren't able to play.
Can you go? I mean, I personally think that trying to get community input on a budget by voting what everyone is gonna be a disaster. I mean, if they want to do that, then they should join the school board and do that. I think the one comment that we had as a budget committee, Sean, for you is that giving us some of these what ifs, it could, when you say administration, that's you, right, and the team here. I think unlike last year, we want to make sure that the school board and frankly, if the community members want to show up and give their input too on these things, when we're discussing these, they should absolutely attend and give us their input because we listen to the input when people come to the meetings. But I think this year a little bit different. We want to be careful because I think last year, sometimes we put you in a tough position of saying, what do you recommend? Which means you need to recommend sometimes cutting somebody when your recommendation is actually not to do with that, right? Like to deliver the program that you want, and the school board has to make that decision. So we can't just always fall back on Sean and then have the community then blame Sean for making the cut when it was the school board's decision to make that cut because of the budget needs, right? Like we were just right. So it's also unfair to ask you what's the lesser of evils, or if you need to cut somebody, because then it looks like you just made this decision when the reality is actually you didn't want to do any of that. You gave us a budget that included all of it. But I think that's why I want to have a few scenarios of what might get us to the lower end, how we could get to the lower end of the range if we need to get there.
Yeah, I don't mean to be too cute by half, but I mean, the way I understand it, our equalized pupil count is going to change. Every other school district in Vermont's equalized pupil count is going to change. Then everybody's got to figure out what they're spend, and jurisdictions that now have more taxing capacity need to figure out whether they're actually invest that money in schools or not. And so I just would urge us not to get to the end of the story too soon and say, oh, this is what we're thinking about the budget cuts. Right? We're just trying to understand how this stuff works. So all of a sudden, between the tax commissioner's letter and AOE's analysis, we find ourselves in a tough spot. We know our options. Right? And I understand that. Somebody like hear that and go, no, you're being cute about the language. But I think it's really true. I just don't think we totally understand what position we're in this winter. And I don't want to ask Sean and Greg and Jamie and Jay to be like, hey, I know we're 2 weeks from the holidays here. you mind running down a half dozen ideas or coming up with something? Because that doesn't seem very responsible. You know, I think Garrett and Neil also during the committee discussion, which I was part of, were 100% right in being sensitive of, hey, the message cannot be, hey, Sean is trying to devise budget cuts as a principal, right? Because that creates an adversarial situation. It's the school board trying to do due diligence, and people who want to talk about that should talk to us. Now, if we find ourselves in really a close spot kind of spur, and you might want to make a decision on something on this list or something else, then there's an appropriate discussion about what's the right public forum to have. Is it an extended school meeting? Is it really letting people know that they should come to our budget hearings, right? Well, lots of people threaten to come to our budget hearings, but very few people actually do. But I think that's a conversation for a little further down the road. Right now, I think we'd be raising an alarm, but not enough information to have a meaningful conversation with our constituents. And I think that would be hard for everybody.
Well, just to give a sense of the magnitude, right, so the distribution of 3.5% and a 5.5 on the K through 6, or a 5.5 and a 7.5 on the total is basically 120,000 or basically 140,000 respectively. Total, right, so we're kind of looking at, you know, if we needed to cut 120,000 out of the K through 6 or 140 out of the total budget to get us down to the lower end, what are some options? So we're not talking, and again, that's on a 6.2 million and 7.6 to 7.8 million. So we're talking quite small numbers in the grand scheme of things, but that's what we face every year is how do you get these things down? It's not just about saving a couple of computers sometimes. It's like, those are really hard things to get down by 100 grand. Lisa?
I think to just in the careful communication of this, we have to sort of name what happens almost every single year. Is that people don't realize how important something is until it gets mentioned as something that might not happen the next year. And then people show up to make their voices heard. And that's when I think we put the principal in the position of looking like the bad guy, or, you know, whatever's happening. So I just want to challenge us, and I don't know exactly how to do this. We had a great discussion in the last board meeting about communication and about, you know, trying to be as transparent as possible. But I would like to encourage us to ensure that information about, you know, what $120,000 looks like versus $140,000 versus $200,000. I'm not saying that that's on the table, but, you know, in case it were, actually looks like, while there's still time for people to feel that they're part of the discussion versus part of the complaint after a decision has been made. And whether that is actually what has happened or not doesn't really seem to matter. We just need to make sure that people who want to be included are as included as early as possible, and that's hard to do because people don't know what they care about until it's getting ready to go away. So I don't know the solution to that, but I just want to name it. That is a problem that has happened all 3 years that I've been part of this budget process, and I don't know the solution, but I do think we need to be aware of it.
Yeah.
So I think the solution to that is people need to come to a board meeting, especially the budget ones, right? Because at the end of the day, right, we're offering Sean some recommendations on what we think the budget should be. Because our job is to make sure that we balance the cost of that versus the ability of our community to pay for it, right? So ultimately, it's the board's position. It's not, I want to hear everything that Sean has to say, but at the end of the day, we're the ones that put our signatures on the warrant article that goes on the ballot, right? And so we're the body that's making those decisions about whether or not something gets cut. I want to just add the one thing is that if you look at the what if scenarios, I was very conscious of this in trying to balance cuts versus revenue, because I do think that there are some areas that you could look at to possibly address that revenue side of the equation and not be totally focused on the expense side of things. And so to the extent that we can take a look at, you know, what would happen with expanded pre-K opportunities,
Or possibly, changes to sixth grade and maybe sending them over to RMS and whether or not that's got a positive financial impact. I really want to know about those things as well too. So it's not only about cuts for me.
Yeah, and just quickly, I really appreciate Lisa's comments in the sense that we did have a really good conversation about communication. And I think it's important to acknowledge that, at least in my opinion, school leadership and the SAU got off to a really strong start in Norwich with communication between proactive communication about projects that are going on, in the facilities, and Sean would set the stage for the school year, and Greg saying, hey, you might be worried about these tests. We are too, right? I just thought that was a really good pre-shoot and a good way to start the year, and I really appreciated the progress on that. And I guess what I'll think about after this meeting on this issue, so based on your comments, is the difference between creating awareness and asking for engagement or a process. You need to create awareness, but it's premature to create a full process. And to Neil and other people's points, we have a full process. Right, and so getting people to work at a budget process is important, but I would think really hard about how we might create more awareness. And like Neil, I appreciate that some of the opportunities here aren't sort of a tactical battle about more or less. It's like, oh, what would you do different? Right? Are there some ways to do this different and get real facts about it? Because you wouldn't make a decision about spending pre-K or moving to sixth grade RMS without the proper due diligence, actually say, yeah, the purpose is to come to the budget impact. We're really going to take our school board and the related board that we're on in that direction.
So I guess to follow up on that, I would challenge us to get people involved in the process, which you're right, it exists, it's there. Before it becomes a panic button that people hit because they think something's gonna get cut. So if we could think of a different carrot besides something that you love might not be here next year, earlier on, to get people to be here earlier, to be part of this, that would be very helpful. And I don't know what it is. I think maybe it's doing what the SAU did so beautifully. I got tons of comments about that posting that you all did on the listserv about the projects. People were so appreciative of it, like just, I think I got more comments on that in a positive way than anything I've gotten since we've been on the school board. So, putting something on the listserv that's just, come talk to us before this becomes something that you care about that might be leaving. And again, it's human nature not to care until you think something's gone. And then one other comment on the revenue side that I didn't see here, and this sort of goes with the earlier comment about energy, is there a way for some of our energy projects to make revenue if we can include the rest of the town in it? Like, if we put in I'm just making something up, an extra array of solar panels, can we sell some of the excess energy to the church next door in Tracy Hall? I mean, I just don't know, that it feels as if some of these projects that we're doing to make our school system more energy efficient could benefit the whole town in a way that people might be willing to give us some money for that to happen. And I don't know what that is. Sorry, Jamie, for adding extra work, but.
All right, okay.
I always look at our budgeting process through the lens of the prior experience, where when we talked about budget cuts, we were actually starting at zero and going negative, where there are actual cuts. So we're talking about limiting the increase in the budget. And I think maybe the answer to who gets blame or credit for sort of reducing those increases. Maybe we approach it administratively when we do internal budgeting by looking at the lower end of the corridor. And start there so that later, when things become clearer, we're talking about adding things rather than taking things away. I'll talk about that with my fellow administrators about whether that makes sense to them when we have a picture of what does our staffing roster look like, how much will it cost to do exactly what we're doing this year, and how close is that 3.5 hour week, and then talk about what we think we need to make the program better, improve things, and then come back to you. We're assuming that we're coming to the high end of the corridor. If we're disciplined, we don't have to.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's kind of one of the issues that I always have with the budgeting process, is we always start with last year's budget and build on it. So I'll just take one example, like capital expenditures. Just because we spent this number last year, we always assume that we should just add something to it this year, but it's like, to your point, we're never building from the very bottom up, and I don't want to overcomplicate things, but that's just one example, but it's like. We're usually just taking what we have and then saying, okay, let's just keep adding to it, when the question is that base number really the right number or not? You know, that's where we're relying oftentimes on the administration to dig into those numbers, because all we get is we get 15 pages of line by line by line stuff. And we're not gonna go sit there and be like, this 10 grand number and 50 grand and what's in this, and maybe you don't need, but it's always nice to have it in there, because we used it last year, maybe, and sometimes you do need it every single year, because that's the end of the day, it's a repeatable.
I'd say, my observation, Mr. Chairman, is that the robust and fruitful discussion we're having about the 24-25 budget would indicate that the budget guidance is good and ought to be approved. Yeah, I agree. Debate it.
Let me just mention, so one thing, so we did go, so class sizes, just so everyone knows, on the policy committee this morning, we actually looked at the Hanover, it was on for Hanover, and we kind of mentioned quickly, hey, this is also quite relevant for Norwich. The Hanover one is, both of them are looking at the guidelines of the states, so very much our K through 2, and then 3 through 5, or 3 through 6 in the states. It's on as far, way under actually what both states recommend. And then I think the only thing that we were thinking about maybe changing on the Norwich one, which I'll work with Brian, is so that. And again, the class sizes are actually quite equitable too, as far as the range of classes on both sides of the river, just so everyone's clear of that. The only big difference is the Hanover budget says a target range of this, whereas the Norwich budget actually has language in it, I believe, that says shall not exceed. And I think we probably want to remove that and make it a target, because as we know, if that number shall not exceed 22, and we want to decide 2 sections of 6th graders that end up being 23, it may be the right decision, but our policy is going to say you can't do that, right? So I think we may want to change the policy. I'm not saying we need to increase class size, don't get me wrong, but if we're looking at 3 sections of 11 and 2 sections of 23, right, I want to make sure that we have the flexibility to make those decisions. Yeah.
Yeah, so I will add, so I was maybe one of the proponents of looking at this class size stuff, but in full disclosure, I want to let this board know, right? I brought the same idea forward to the Dresden Budget Committee, and it was not entertained. So I suggested for that committee that we take a look at class sizes, and it didn't make it out of the Dresden Budget Committee, so you guys never saw it. So I just want to make sure that you all know where some of your colleagues are on this. I'm not going to be offended if folks are like, no, I don't want to touch class sizes because I think it's, too much of a third rail, and it's going to get people up in arms. My reason for doing it is because I think that when you look at a budget that's 60 to 80% personnel costs, so salaries and benefits, and you're in a situation where you need to make some appreciable change in the budget, right? You're not going to get it by cutting field trips. The money's going to come from personnel costs. And so I do think that a review of class size policy and how that's being implemented in the school district, with a lens of student outcomes, right? So do lower class sizes mean that our students are going to do better? I think there's a whole host of data out there on that, as well as the education sphere, that maybe we want to look at. But I did want to let people know that this class size issue is not universally accepted amongst all of the board members, and so I just wanted to look at that. And which is why you'll see it in the Norwich guidelines, maybe if we approve it, but you're not going to see it in Dresden.
And again, the policies, actually, our policy is more restrictive than Dresden, right? Because we actually have a definitive cap that we are not allowed to go about so it's a little bit, and again, all I can say is, as I wrote, the big word is this flexibility. So, and I think when we're looking at what's going on at the state, it's 30% and whatnot, like, again, we just want to be able to say that, if we need to do something, we have the ability to do that.
Yeah, so sorry, to back up to class size. I feel like we just went through this where we reduced the class size, we could reduce the number of educational assistants and thereby cut the budget. So now you're saying we could go back up?
No, I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that
More educational.
if that's the right decision with a class or a group of kids or whatnot, and depending on our teacher mix and whatnot, that.
And then we have to hire some assistants,
Or maybe we end up hiring an assistant for a class, I don't know, right? So
I mean, I'm suggesting, I mean, you don't need to add the educational assistant, right? I think we've always gone with this assumption that there needed to be a certain number of adults in the classroom based on the number of kids there. And I can tell you that if you look across the country, our class sizes are low in comparison.
yes.
And I'm not convinced that we're seeing the increase in student achievement that's commensurate with the low class sizes that we have.
Do you think you'll see more student achievement with larger class sizes and fewer teachers?
I'm suggesting that when you're in a situation where your tax rate looks like it might shoot up by 30%, there ought to be a discussion on that item.
I feel like this is the 180 from what we just did 2 years ago.
I disagree, right? I think what we did 2 years ago was made sure that we had some highly qualified individuals in those classrooms, and we made a conscious decision to make sure that those were classroom teachers, and that the benefit of the educational aid, I think, was outweighed by having a highly trained, highly efficient classroom teacher in that class. So I see them as two different things.
I also just want to clarify based on this exchange that what I heard Garrett say is that the policy, I mean, the policy needs to be changed to offer some flexibility. Not that we're going to do it, but just that if, you know, there is a class that the 5th grade, for instance, can handle because of the makeup of the kids. I have no idea. I'm making this up. I just pulled the 5th grade out of my hat, that if they can handle having one more student than our policy allows, it would be nice for the administration here to be able to do that without having to come to us and have a school board vote to override our policy to allow that to happen. So to change, what I heard was just to ask for the policy to change to read more like what the Hanover policy reads, which is, this is kind of the tunnel that the class size need to be in, not that it can't be bigger than this. Is that correct? Because that feels like a different discussion than how many teachers and how many students and how many paraeducators, like, yeah, so.
And it's aligning with the other side, it's a little stark, the difference in our policy versus the numbers of the same are very similar and they're very.
How close is the 5th grade being over the edge?
It's teetered over for like a few days.
It's years over.
That's the problem. We don't want to be in that position because it's a target number and we're trying to keep the target there, but like, you know, it's a policy that can't, like, it should be a target number, I think, rather than that. Because we have to split it, yeah.
Having gone through a kindergarten with 26 children and no educational assistant and 1 teacher, that's a slippery slope, but.
Well, trust me,
Discuss
that's
all
what
this.
makes it.
I did the first time.
We're looking at keeping.
Just part of it, yeah, just part
The
of it.
K through 2 is very much lower
It's 20.
targets. No, I think the targets in the policy are much lower than that for K through 2. They're low. I think it's 11 to 17.
It's average fewer than 20 students per teacher.
I don't think the knowledge policy.
So I don't know where it's daily.
Oh, that's a week.
Yeah, ours is different. Ours is completely different.
You know, like I said, I'm pretty sure that Hanover policy for K through. Well, if you look at it, it was what, it was 11 to 18. I have to go back in my policy meeting this morning.
This is the development. You can move on.
No, we're drastically underrated because Jay pulled those up this morning. It was almost laughable how low we are compared to AME.
I think the other thing too is this, that again, these budget guidelines are creating a lot of great conversation that really will be informed and we'll be able to get into greater detail when we have our internal administrative meetings. We always grapple with these things. I can remember years when we had increased numbers, but it was so late in the hiring season that we made the decision to hire additional ed assistants to to toggle between, I can't remember if it was third grade or fourth grade or somewhere in there. Really not because of the budget implication, but more so because we didn't feel we found a qualified teacher that late in the game. So we always have these conversations, and then we also always reserve the right to approach the board and say, hey, look, we're numbers up to 26. We really could use an extra teacher, and then you get to deliberate on that. So yeah, I think no matter what we end up with a policy, the realities, as those realities become firm, then we can have more concrete conversations about them. But I agree with the guidance that you're giving us in this budget guideline, that it's something for us to take a look at, and again, be prepared. Really, if we found ourselves in a situation where we reduce our spending significantly, it really gets difficult to have that conversation without thinking about staffing. But again, one of the things that I remember the last time when we had this conversation, this is the first time I met you here. And Mike, you too, we were looking at a pretty jammed fifth grade. And there was a lot of consternation about potential class sizes, and we had a conversation about class size research, and we heard testimony from the public, and then ultimately a warrant article went through that provided funding that was intended to be used for class size reduction. So we need to think about it, we need to talk about it, but we won't know for sure until we get deeper into this process.
Yeah, Hanover's target range of 14 to 22 for K through 2, and then 14 to 20, and then 17 to 22 for 3 through 5. So 14 to 20 for K through 2 is the range for. Ours is, I think, the same. Well, in our, like, it says you can't go over 5. Okay. All right, moved over to another. Yeah, so we'll move on from this. I think the last points really on this were just the looking at the kindergarten. I think that was suggestion, which I think is a good one. Is does it make some sense to expand that program even further, or should that again? Is there a revenue opportunity there, right?
Yeah, I mean, I can talk with Sean a little bit more about that. I think that there, I just we should run numbers, right? I think we need, it's based on what the community need is. It's based on whether or not we have the space to be able to offer it. And then I think it's just based on the number of kids, because you need enough kids to justify the expense of an additional teacher if that was necessary. And then weigh that against what would happen if you were to send all of those dollars out the door to some other place, right?
And the last one was just like the 6th grade, and I think, Sean, that's just so we're clear. So the Dresden, that seems to have gotten some traction on the Dresden side as well, just so we're all aware. So I think everyone seems to be moving towards that as far as all the kids want it, the parents want it, everyone seems to be wanting it. But I think for now all of a sudden, like, okay, let's start to at least get our ducks in order. So I think that needs to be something that we start having a discussion with both the RMS administration and our administration, right, to figure out how would it work, how, right, and that's not necessarily the next year's budget, but it is something that we need to start putting some pen to paper on and kind of thinking through what's it mean, are there savings, is it going to be more expensive, right, like we just don't know. But I think that does have to, unfortunately, fortunately, we want to get the administrations together and start talking shop, because it does seem like the Dresden board, right, is starting to talk through that.
Yeah, I didn't sense any opposition, and so I think if you could have some conversations with Tim and that gang over there, even if it's just some high level discussions, and if it's like back of the napkin, like, is this a cost savings or is this a cost adder? Knowing that we would have some additional transportation costs to maybe check out. I don't know if they're, per pupil costs over at Richmond School or higher than what we've got here when you look at just that grade level. Those are the types of things that I think we'd be interested in learning about.
Okay. All right, any other comments on this one? Okay. SBAC enrollment.
So I think that's what I was gonna talk about. The little presentation I put is on principal's report, I think, but yeah. So if you click under principal report, and there's one item there called data review. My thought was just to kind of go through it sort of quick and have you guys ask questions at any time. Not spend too much time, but so every year, usually in June, there's a little bit of a data review. This year we went out because of the new remote testing. It was supposed to be out August 17th, and it was out for like 3 days, and then an email that everybody said, don't share. So, and I got, we can share it in cross-report effective whatever issue they're having statewide. So we can't share much, but we can share some, and we will send home individual student reports, hopefully by the end of the week or early next week. It's definitely clunky, the whole system, the reporting system. So I got the types of data I'm just going to talk about, and that's the second slide. The third slide, I want to take a moment to talk about PBIS implementation. So the year before I started here, so that's 5 years ago, I believe, the school decided to try to create some kind of framework for positive behavior intervention and supports, and they did. The little graph to the right shows our implementation. And how we get that is we have someone from PBIS come in and work with the team here to go through a rubric. And so our tier 1, this is relevant to later, our tier 1 implementation is really, it's universal for all kids. So they know the rules, they're being taught the rules, they practice the rules, they get reinforced positively, they have different things in school that we do to do that. So we've really gone up on tier 1, and 93% is very good. Like, that's schools that do this for a long time, sometimes 93%. So what that means is in all the tier 1 rubric pieces, I only get a couple where we're not at 2 out of 0, 1, 2. There might be a couple of ones. Tier 2 means it's the targeted piece. So if someone's needs some support, we have things in our school that we practice that help give those supports. So that is lower, it's still gone up, and it's at 73%, and that's actually quite a good accomplishment as well. Because that's only going to really help like 10–15% of kids nationally. That's like a national average, not for NCS. And so sometimes we put as much fidelity into just a little bit, but it's really important, or else we spend a ton of time in help kids. So I feel like we made a lot of improvement there. Tier 3 is intensive, we really haven't implemented here yet, mostly because it's not something that we feel like we have to do yet. Now we'll get to it. I mean, when we feel like tier 2 is really great, tier 1 is really great right now. The behavior breakdown, sometimes I show other things, this is what I'm showing this year, is that 90% of our kids get 0 to 1 behavior forms filled out a year. So that's really, that means that they are totally like bought into all of our rules and expectations. They don't really need any, they might be reminded, but they're not going to get any kind of other intervention. About 7% of our kids, and usually the national average is about 80, so 90 a little bit higher. The yellow, that little part of the top triangle there, 2 to 5 referrals, about 7% of our kids, and a few kids, 3%, have 6 or more referrals. So just to put that into context, sort of, those are the kids that we're spending a little bit more time with the interventions and data collecting and meeting with the parents and coming into the teams and VSB. So but it's working really well. So just to give you feel good, like 90% of the kids are absolutely one, maybe one a year. So the next part I want to talk about is climate. I'm not going to go through all these things, you can read them as you want. But we give our climate survey to 3rd through 6th graders, which I think is important because I feel like our kindergartners, 1st and 2nd graders, would just add a lot to this data, but they can't do it independently. And so we don't give it to them. You can explain it to them, but you bias, and so they recommend not to do that. And just to kind of let you know that if it was a 4, so we do this in the fall and in the spring, November and April. You'll see a middle column there because one class didn't do it, and I opened up a window again, but I had to report it another time there. So, but generally, our kids are averaging overall these different components, the 11 questions, as being a little bit above often, 3.15, 3.16 there. We break it down by grades, by gender. So there are some things that we talk internally about, maybe a grade that's lower or higher, or if it's consistent year to year, or if it's a class that's going up. The next part is the staff survey. So there's 29 questions. You only see 6 categories there because there's a few questions that make up each category. Good luck reading it. I can't hardly read it, but it's gone up, and it's gone up for a few things like staff connectedness, structure for learning, and peer adult relationships, and parental involvement, which is great because that was our big goal last year, coming out of COVID, trying to get more parents involved. So it looked like they felt like it was a lot better. And then really overall, we're having people overall rank above 3, between 3 and 4, and you can look at peer adult relationships at 3. Oh, I guess it's physical environment is the lowest at 3.05. But everything else is going pretty well, and to get half the people saying strongly agree, and maybe the other half saying somewhat agree is pretty good, I think, from how parents feel. It's been going up a little bit, but not like probably statistically significantly. But it's still nice to see it going up.
Can I ask a question for you?
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Is it possible to verify that?
Error bar?
Yeah, I have no idea looking at this, if like everybody marked this as 3.5, or if there were, 5 4s and a 1 and a 2, and I would just love to see a standard deviation.
I don't know. I just take it off the PBIS website.
So
Probably bigger than this. You can take the data and redo it yourself, I guess, because we don't have individual requests.
Okay.
We just might have groups.
Okay,
We do have a staff with an individual.
it's more meaningful, I can see what the variation was.
Yeah. But that's a good point. I mean, there could be like a 0 somewhere in there.
Well, I mean, if everybody's clustered between 3 and 4, then that's awesome, but if.
For this one, it's 24 respondents, I'd say, so it's probably not gonna be too many.
It's a significant.
Yeah. Yeah.
Amount.
So we could look at that. And we asked teachers not to say which grade they're part of, because you do have an option, but we're only have to look at teachers, it's kind of obvious. The climate survey is families, and kind of the same thing. It does have many more people answering. It's getting harder, for 116 in the spring, 133 in the fall. Overall, we went up a little bit in each one, looks like. But not probably statistically significantly, but 700s, I guess, overall. But it's kind of good to see that it's still between a little bit higher than the teachers in different categories. 3.38 or mid-3s. All right. So then, if you remember, maybe a year ago, we talked about our new universal screener. So iReady is a nationally normed screener and diagnostic. So that means that our kids take it in reading. It's not really like it's more just reading skill and math. And our goal last year was really to get accurate information, because about 5 years ago, we were getting people participating in this when they felt like it. So now we're really standardized 3 times a year. There's windows. We have in-service days to look at the data, to make intervention groups. This year, our big goal is not just to look at intervention groups, which will give them more support, but like our universal instruction, like what areas, which standards we need to be looking at more per grade. But going through this is a few slides, and this thing gives you so much data that it's hard to pick what to share. So overall math, this is all our kids, every kid, wherever they start on that first diagnostic, is given a number for annual growth target. So it could be different. There's a few third graders, one that's takes the fall diagnostic and has a second grade level, they might have a different annual growth rate than someone that's in third grade that takes the fall diagnostic and about fourth grade level, which is good. So overall school average, take all the kids and their annual growth and average it out in math was averaging over 100%, 127% of growth. The color bars on the right coincide with above grade level, which is the green stripes, early grade level, which is the green, which at the end of the year in fifth grade, you want to be early fifth grade, but that still counts as grade level, even though it's maybe a low grade level. Yellow is one grade below, and then like there's two different reds, that's 2 grades below or more. Is the red with the slashes, and that's our whole school. So we could say 82% made their annual growth, or ended, sorry, at sort of grade level or early grade level. That's math. The next slide shows all the different grades. And the first column with all the blue bars, like 119 at the top, is the average in kindergarten. And there's also a stretch growth, which is a really cool part about this program. We have a kid that's below grade level, we're really gonna push and hope and set goals. And we didn't do it so much last year because it's brand new to the program. But we grew into it and there'll be more this year. Stretch growth is something behind 20% of annual growth, so we're just trying to push certain kids over the course of maybe 2 or 3 years or up to grade level, not just fix it in 1 year. So there's our averages for all those grades in math. And our ELA, I don't have to explain this all again, it's the same thing as for math. It's a little bit higher with overall grade level than math. And a little bit more growth. And you can look at the next, I'm looking at the I-rated ELA growth by grade. So you have a few grades that actually averaged stretch growth above 100% stretch growth. So that was nice. But the tricky thing is average means, like you were saying earlier, you could have some really little kids and you have some kid that's got 400% growth. And we just pull it up. So that's our next slide. This is the one I think I'm taking to heart. And we have a data team this year and they're taking it to heart and we're going to be working on this. So the I-rated group data with the bars, if you look at the school, it just means that in reading, we had about, I can't actually quite figure it out, but I'll say about 70, maybe 68% of kids got their annual growth in reading. So it just shows that even though we average 120%, we definitely had some kids that are super high and brought up the average for the kids that didn't reach their annual growth. Does that make sense? And then math is a little lower. And then the categories there are tricky to share. We have free and reduced. We have 504. And the reason we tricky share is such small numbers. Like we have just a few kids in these areas, but I'm doing it. So we have a category called non-white. And kids that are in English as English language learners, ELL. Just to show where they sort of go there, compared to the whole school, I guess. And we don't have IEP kids, it's mostly because we thought the demographic information was put in there, and then now we're getting new rosters the last 3 weeks. Somehow we're not able to access that information yet. So I can get that information, but I still have it. I made the slide in July, so. That's already. And then we have the Vermont cap, which people have referred to here. I only shared this one slide about it. So if you didn't know, it's brand new, it's not SBAC, so our agenda is kind of like outdated there. So The reason why Vermont says they changed from SBAC to Vermont Comprehensive Assessment Program, Vermont CAP, is that it has more ways of looking at data for equity. And it does, when I went to the webinar, you can look at state of Vermont, and just pick a category like female, free and reduced, state of Vermont, and how they all do it, or Norwich school districts. So it's pretty cool. Said something happened, I don't know what it is, doesn't affect us. And I can't look at that information in class 2s, and it's still not available to us. But I downloaded those test reports before we were banned from looking at them, and they said I could share it, so that's our overall percents. ELA is 80% in 3rd grade, just to make sure you're reading that right. 5th grade is the only grade that takes the science test that's aligned to the next generation science standards. They're a little bit higher than they were with the SBAC. You can't really compare the two. They're both aligned to the same standards. There is a paper going to come out in December about how closely you can look at that data and compare it, but we'll see. Our ELA is higher. I just remember overall ELA in the previous test was like 83% of our kids look like they're proficient, 84% maybe. So this is going to be higher. I was able to compare us to the state of Vermont, but they really don't want us to share that. We were expectedly higher than before. We didn't really seem to change much. And there were a lot of glitches in this test administration statewide. So from the state's perspective, I think they're just trying to be as careful as possible. And we had some glitches, but they really weren't that serious. And then takeaways, I just would share that. Pretty excited about like how proficient we are. I always think we could do better because we have resources and families engaged and kids that are generally look at the behavior data are pretty great, ready to learn. So we could, but it's awesome so far. You know, we have 93% of our 6th graders proficient. It's pretty great. I really am really proud of the staff for really getting good data. Not everyone loved it. There were some hiccups, but generally it was awesome. And the lower you go, the less reliable data is kindergartens on the computer, but generally it's really good. We were able to really inform, we weren't just like, hey, math interventions, which is Mr. McGee, who do you think you want to take for math? We're looking at data, we're having conversations. So that was really helpful. Climate survey, I just think it's generally like a great picture. You know, we hear things that are hard. We looked at all the parent surveys as a team, looked for any kind of like areas of significance that we want to email or on a Google form, and we just couldn't think that warranted it. Of course, people always want to give you feedback. We feel like they give us feedback all the time, but there wasn't like a trend where, oh, we need to investigate this more with families. Next steps, things like, I guess that's to work on. You know, we want to keep improving family involvement. We have everything set for the whole year now. The staff agreed on it last June. All of our school-wide events are in the calendar. We've been handing out pieces of paper. We get back to school night on the 14th. One of the tasks for teachers is to share with parents how to get to be able to volunteer. We have over 100 people that are registered to volunteer. We have ways to volunteer easily. We'll have that practice school night again, so we're trying. We really feel like we need to improve our universal instruction still. I mean, it's still like that's hard. We have so many high-flying kids here, so we forget like the kids that maybe need a little more help but don't need to get into math intervention. We just need some better universal instruction. But we're going to look at that data and make decisions together as the staff. And then we had a great best team. That's the PTO team went to a week-long, 4-day-long conference. And just, it was sort of approached as like another recycle of a new term. Really was, it's all about just making these story people along. So we have some ideas, some very simple ideas to introduce into morning meetings and staff meetings. And then maybe next year we can grow more. So it's a way of looking at how kids can feel like they belong, and they have choice and agency in their daily lives. So it's a big task, and we'll start somewhere, but we want to see them, particularly for the student survey, hopefully increase.
Yeah, question. So, going back to the climate survey for students,
Yeah.
I saw question number 11 was the lowest ranked one, and that was students in class behaves that teachers can teach. And then I looked at the slide previous to that, but a relatively few number of students that get referrals. What's going on?
It's a good question. We have to investigate that already more, I think. Because they, sometimes it's,
And I guess the thing that was intriguing about me is like the students were self-identifying that, like, I'm good, but all my buddies, they're misbehaving,
it
right?
usually happens with every student who comes to my office. But it is true, like, it is interesting, I think, and the way classrooms are now is different for some kids, like, there's a lot of different style of kids and what we allow them to do, like the flexibility.
Am I, sorry, and maybe take my, am I ignoring the obvious that was COVID?
That's always a possibility. I definitely have noticed certain grades are really affected.
But it was 22, 23, right? So.
Yeah.
But
But I'm talking about kids that didn't need to learn those skills in
Right.
pre-K.
Oh, gotcha. You're also looking at student perception data in the second slide, in the actual data report, that's actual incidents that have been referred to the office. So you got two different things happening.
There's two things, kids could be reporting an interesting one here, and also sometimes, maybe adults aren't reporting certain things that other adults are.
But maybe could I ask the question a different way? Do the results on number 11 surprise you?
They're disappointing. So yes. Yeah, because I think that, we go to classrooms all the time, and I see really great attention, engagement from kids, but I don't know how they can, feel personally.
I also think that our kids have high expectations of what it means to be a student. Like, I think when they come to school, they expect people are going to listen, they're gonna participate, do what's asked of them. So sometimes a behavior here may have been another school that I was in, not that something people find. But it is a good thing, that our kids take learning seriously. When they come to school, they want their friends also to take learning seriously. If you've got someone goofing around here, it's sometimes perceived different than in other schools that I've been in. So I think it's a good thing. So I think our kids are like, what, we're going to school, we want to learn. My buddy, I really like, goofs around, I don't really like that. And I think that's what they're saying, that not everyone comes to school as ready as me to learn. Now, sometimes even those kids might goof around a little bit, but.
That's good.
Can I follow up on that if you're gonna change the subject? I'm not gonna-
No, go ahead. I mean, it was a segue, but go ahead.
Okay, so I will also, in my daughter's experience, I know there is a great deal of behavior that never gets referred out to you guys, but that she considered terribly disruptive in her class. There was one child that was screaming during standardized testing, and she'd come home crying because she felt like she wasn't doing her best because someone was screaming in class. Did I ever get referred to you? Probably not, but I'm sure that she wrote, I never get to learn appropriately on her papers, because she feels that way. So, I mean, I think it's gonna vary largely class to class.
One of the interesting things that coming from that story, the purchase piece is because we've seen the rules about being kind, respectful, responsible, and safe. So this year, we're really encouraging each classroom to make their own classroom rules so kids are creating them. I mean, they're gonna be in those categories, because we don't want to change that, but we're gonna say, what does it look like in our class? Kind of like when we're in a staff meeting, we came with the same thing. What does it look like when we're kind to each other as staff? So we did that in service and asked the teachers to do the same thing with their classes. Hopefully, that can help with a little bit of agency in how the class is run.
So when I look at the iReady data, and I'm trying to interpret the current placement distribution. If I look at math, am I to interpret this that 82% of students were at or above grade level?
Yes, and that's considering that at the end of the year, they're going to be early in grade level. It's not where we want them, but they are considered on grade level. I mean, depends who you're talking to, but I read it say you should consider that on grade level. Does that make sense? So at the end of fifth grade year, you may have a student that is in that lime green part. That's early on grade level, so we would expect them to be that at the beginning of fifth grade, and they're getting there at the end of fifth grade.
Okay, because this goes back to the point that you've made before and was in part of our strategic planning, right? And we had a brief conversation about this, I think, like a Dresden meeting. But one of our strategic planning things was that it's something about the effect of teaching at grade level. And I'm curious from looking at the data here, like, does Marion Cross really teach at grade level, or are we teaching above grade level? If I pluck the fifth grader out of here and drop them in another school in Vermont, would they really be a sixth grader?
So I think that gets back to that universal instruction that we're gonna look at a little bit more this year. Because I think at times we might be teaching above grade level, and so the kids are just a little bit below, like, but really,
But they're fine.
they're okay.
Yeah.
We need to learn how to really reach it in the classroom. And most of the time that happens, but there might be certain that maybe it's a book selection, because that's one thing I see. If it's like a choice of books, sometimes, most of the time, kids are given something at their level. But if they get a choice, they're gonna pick something that's kind of a cool book to read, that's really hard. Even if they can't read that well. So I think that's one of the attributes of a school like this, is like we school to be smart. But then it's also pressure on some kids that are, a little older.
If we're really teaching, if we're really teaching above grade level, more than 61% would be mid or above.
Well, that just means that's what the kids are testing at the end of the year. So it's not like we're teaching them, right? It's they've taken that last test and the test is then you're above grade level.
I mean, if we think we're teaching at above grade level, only 61% are testing at the end of the year, mid or above grade level, we're really not doing a good job of teaching them above grade level, because then otherwise they would all be above grade level.
Yeah, unless they can't learn the foundational skills to get up to grade level.
Correct.
Right.
Anyways, not saying
So while we're trailing like Wobegon, we are still, if you compare that benchmark testing that we're doing for iReady with the Vermont CAP, although it is a new assessment, you're looking at like over 80%, 90%, 93% on this closer to a norm reference measure that the state's giving. And so you get a correlation there, you kind of see where we are, and then we know that by the time our students get to ninth grade, if you are average, if you are normal, you are way behind your peers by a significant percent, because our students are going into ninth grade reading at a post high school level, like above, like more than half. And if we then also take a look at the survey data that we just gathered yet again, and we think about the average education level of our families, over 40% of our families that responded to that survey, and it was pretty highly rated return, indicated that someone in their household had at least a doctorate. And you throw in the folks that have a master's at the highest level of educational attainment, you're looking at like probably almost the same breakdown in terms of proficiency as we have in educational attainment households. Relational, not causal, but certainly a reflection of a community. And that poses big challenges. And I think one of the conversations you might be alluding to, Neil, is the fact that in our data, and I'm basing this on my recollection from the middle school data, there are more students who hadn't achieved proficiency in that reading and science at RMS than are identified for being eligible for special ed services. And so my question there was, and that's why I appreciate you folks disaggregating this data and digging down into it, because there is a push and pull within our community between those who worry that we're not providing as much for the students at the higher end than we are interventions for students at the lower end, came a lot clear in the family survey we did here. And, you know, we had a lot of families thinking, you're not doing enough for my child that needs support, and others thinking, you're not doing enough for my child that's accelerating. So it really, it forces us, I think, instruction to be thinking about how are we going to do more and more differentiation within a classroom. And you also have folks who are saying we need to be doing more tracking, where we're segregating kids by ability. And we start running into all kinds of equity questions, and it's great conversation, and it's great for us to research, and it's a lot of the work that Robin's engaged in with our teachers. But it's a really unique, it's a unique characteristic of a district like this that isn't average and isn't normal. Not in a bad way, just a different.
Yeah, hopefully this is a quick question, because I know we're running late, but slide number 12. I'm wondering, would one student fit multiple of those categories? Like, could someone have a 504 and be free or reduced lunch and be they're included in both? So if they, okay, so this, okay.
If they are in those categories, they're included in any category that they're
And, okay, so it was like kind of check all of the above for any student.
in. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Helpful to know.
Any other questions? Just a thing I might mention, weren't the other tests flip-flopped as far as like overperform on math and underperform in ELA?
No.
Or do we always strong in ELA?
Yeah.
Not underperform, but the percentage.
Yeah, it always seems to be a little bit higher.
A little higher.
Sell at a lesser rate.
And I think, you know, this is our last year, was our first year doing the new math program. And, you know, people are reading and math and literature teachers, so they do everything. So hopefully we'll see that. If everyone's engaged with instructing the other math coaches and doing the curriculum part, you know, math. Our kids are smart, so you nice to see that balance out there.
And then what happens like, this my last one, like that 5th grade, you know, the decaf.
Yeah.
Like the 5th grade math was, I mean, we're talking, this isn't low, but it's definitely lower than, so is that like, you guys look back at that, and you're like, okay, what happened here to this cohort of math? Could this just have been like, I'm just making stuff up because maybe it was like the fact that one of the math teacher left and had to be filled in for part of the year and there's disruption, like, could that have been why that? And actually, I was the 5th grade, actually ironically, but like, you guys actually look at that and kind of be like, like something happened here. It's 10 points below everyone else.
It's hard to know exactly what happened, but we definitely look into it when we think about it and we'll talk about it. We haven't had any like specific data discussions yet. That's
Right.
a great little that. But we'll fight on that.
All right. Thank you for the work. Sorry, yeah, this is we'll move on to item I, privileged. I'm sorry. No, sorry.
You're ready to
Yeah,
go.
we're still in business department discussion.
You guys vote.
That's what you're saying.
Okay, we'll bring that.
Should VEHI proxy, sorry, gee. We're still discussing. Go.
I am happy to serve as the voting proxy for both the VEHI at the end.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
All right, now. Business current action, I think nothing has changed here, I think we can do everything by proxy, right? Looking through this. Guidelines, everyone's okay with, handbook changes. We talked about before, the policy, the proxy, the proxies, you good? All right, do we have a motion? Lisa,
Move to approve items B, C, D, E, F, and G by consent.
second. Okay. Those in favor?
But I think you can also do H and I now.
Well, it said we were gonna do it separately
Okay.
on the next line. under public content. It's, otherwise I would have added it, I promise.
Oh, okay.
Items H and I will be voted on separately.
All right.
I don't know why, I didn't question it, I just.
I should think, should I write this in your motion? Because I figured we were all done. Okay, we'll do a motion to approve H and I separately.
Sure,
Lisa?
move to approve VSBIT proxy or certificate of authority as presented with the representative B, Neil Odell, which I love the fact that we put that in there. You know that I'm saying it. Thank you, Neil.
Second, Lily, all those in favor? That also passed unanimously. Okay,
And that covered VEHI as well, too.
and that covered the, yes, that was both of them,
So
right?
it's both of them together, unless you want me to just say it. just
Maybe
say it.
just say the second one,
Okay.
because I think you only said visit.
I did. Sorry, move to approve, I'm just reading this there. Move to approve Neil Odell as the VEHI proxy or certificate of authority as presented.
Second.
All in favor? That's also passed. All right, so we have 3 yes for this one. All right, try to keep 3 kids, because it's getting late already. I report the chair. I'll just maybe do my, and so obviously, yeah, just want to thank everyone for all the hard work. I know Jamie replied to my email last night at 11 something. I know Sean's been running ragged here and everyone has been moving quickly to get the schools open. At least my conversations with both parents and kids has been overwhelmingly positive as far as some new hires that have been made here at Marion Cross. I think everyone seems to be really excited. That's just what I've kind of been hearing, not that people necessarily talk to me as a school board member, but I seem quite excited about it. So, I've not heard any negative things. That's obviously nice. The only thing I was gonna talk about that I think was, yeah, the agenda item we had talked about last time about having, actually, first of all, I think the communication. So I think, one idea that I had is whether we maybe, and this would probably fall on me, and I think it's appropriate, and it seems that people would like to see it, it might help us do things like how we communicate this, or at least if people come to us too late in the process and say, I didn't know about that. I don't know whether we create a little use of this. Some people are like on the website, it's just a little, report of the school board or something, or just a school board update corner, where we would just do a quick summary of the things that we just discussed at this meeting tonight, which I, again, I can do that, but, I could take a few notes, but just kind of outline, these are the high points, and if you care,
You dig deeper in the minutes.
I know people have said we should post that on the list there, we should do that, and I think there is a part of me that just says, maybe we just create a little box on the website or something and create a few bullet points or something. Well,
I'm not volunteering to do this, but it seems like a thing you could put out whose wise words like once a month, right? Like school board update, hey, our next meeting. And I would,
so we could do that. I guess my question for tonight a little bit is, what's the right venue to do it? Do we do, I think one of you guys said that at your old district, there was that little thing, whether we do it on the website, whether we do it as part of it. I was thinking we could do it also as a PTO newsletter that goes out, a little corner on that. Again, I think it'd be once a month, and it'd just be summarizing our meeting.
I would vote, I mean, as long as it's being written, putting it in all 3 places, because not everyone gets Sean's notes, not everyone gets the PTO. But our taxpayers do have access to the listserv if they want it, and so, and I don't think I put it on the listserv, I might just be like, on the listserv, hey, we've got this new feature on the FAU website
Okay.
that highlights the school board, and
Because the list, I don't want to create it into I don't want to do a discussion about it, I don't want to have something else in it.
yeah, I would put it on the list, but I mean, it might be nice when it goes live, just to let the community know on the listserv that there's this new thing on the FAU website that highlights each one of the school board meetings.
Okay.
I'll promise to do it for SAU if that's what we vote in that meeting, so.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd be happy to help.
Okay.
And if it goes on the list, or I have to, my spouse said forbidden me from posting.
No, I think.
No.
I think that's more, I think.
It's just a link.
forget, who's the secretary?
Yeah,
Oh, there you go.
Terry's never done it. All right, so maybe between me and Michael, we can just, I think maybe put a couple bullets, we could even just send it around internally quickly if anyone has any comments.
Yeah.
I think the two after, then we'll just,
That's a highlights.
Yeah, highlights.
Okay, and the other topic, of course, is what I've been which is more of the informational sessions. I did think the comments last week, or last board meeting were great, and we would keep it super short. Does it seem like this is something we should do? I mean, for October, would it be appropriate? I think the budget one would probably be the first one, or maybe we just throw up a couple slides on the budget and what the,
With dates.
what all these things are they're talking about, just as we're going into. I was even thinking just like some detail on kind of what the major drivers of the budget are. And maybe, the budget committee folks, maybe, I could probably do something like that.
You're the chair.
And,
The other thing too, I feel like a lot of discussion we had tonight would be that sort of piece of the meeting. We had just had a lot of discussion that wasn't government, there wasn't policy efforts, as for sure. Just stop. That is go great interest to people worth discussing and instead of having it like interspersed within the agenda we have up front.
right. Okay,
And I just want to remind you as a person who will probably be putting this together, to take a little pressure off yourself, because I think the one thing that I heard at our last meeting was to make these sessions 5 to 10 minutes of presentation and 20 minutes of questions. So just
correct.
like the slides should just be things to get people to ask questions. I don't want you up like Jamie till 11:45 at night putting together a slide
Right.
for a meeting. So
In fairness, as chair, you can
So Bill, you're on the next. So I think, so as far as, priorities, though, I do think, I have my notes here, but probably the next, at the October meeting, why don't we just focus on the budget process timeline, just so everyone's aware. We don't need anything, it's not gonna be talking about the actual budget, it's more about the components of the budget and accurate calculation, and that, right? And then we can, at next meeting, we'll decide what the next one will be. We'll go down the list, so I had written down some other ideas like IPs, and that kind of just explain to people, and this can also go into our notes as well.
What it's like to be a school board.
I had that with the IIP and what's like to be a score with two new ones. All right, I will move on to principals report.
All right, I'll do an enrollment report. We have 322 students. I got this guy correct. They're a little, so our pre-K numbers are 33. We have a couple kids coming in the next 2 weeks. They're just reaching the age to come to school. 42 in kindergarten, 39 in first, 44 in second, 32 in third, 28 in fourth, 42 in fifth, and 41 in fifth grade. I'm not gonna read through my whole program. I will say this has been, I've been very helpful. I think the best feeling to start of the school year. Probably was over the other day, we walked through all the classrooms. We have some really fantastic educators in our building. People who care about kids, who know how to build community, who are positive, who can reach multiple levels and keep kids engaged. And we're super fortunate. You look at across the state and the country, there's still people struggling to find educators. We have a building filled with really outstanding educators. I think that's something we can really appreciate and be proud of. Along with that, there's a lot of community building going on in our school right now. That's the whole purpose of the first beginning of the year, is to help classrooms begin to work like teams and help them to function well and learn expectations. And that's happening in every corner of our building. One thing that didn't make it in here that I will put in is our lunch is totally different than anything we've ever done before. And I think it's pretty successful. We switched from eating in the classroom to eating in the, we call it a gymnasium, or however you want to label the gym that becomes the cafeteria. But it's really great. Kids come in, we have a pretty smooth system going in. We've got people on duty that are happy to be in there eating and talking with kids and engaging. Kids are fantastic in that space, and noise level is, it's pleasant. I asked a few kids, what do you think? And a couple of them said, well, I was gonna be really loud, but kind of nice. We set it up so that you come in and you eat, and when you're done eating, you don't have like chipmunk cheeks. You can go outside to recess. Some kids come in and they're 10-minute eaters, and they eat their lunch and they go outside and they get a little extra time. Some kids come in and they're 25-minute eaters and they really enjoy eating their food. But it's eliminated that thing that happens in school cafeterias where everyone's done and they have to sit for 10 minutes and wait to go outside. So it's kind of fluctuating. Just a little like a diner in there, and wash tables as they go and see people. But it's fun. I think you would, if you told the kids, they would say, this is an improvement in the very class school. We get some friends that we don't see. We get a little extra outdoor time, that's people win.
I can report that I didn't understand it. The benefit as a cafeteria, they understood it as an enhancement of recess, right? So they get quicker to get more recess. That hurts 100%.
And our classrooms are a lot cleaner, and without bringing. The other thing I'll say about the school feeling great is, I think it has a lot to do with the work that our custodial staff did this summer. Our building is really clean. There's a lot of painting, a lot of floors that we've done. I think polishing the floors, like we did in the hallways to get rid of the carpet and make them look like a nice clean building, makes people feel better. New committees, just wanted to give you a little information about the teacher committees that happen here. So one Wednesday a month, we have decided to go off on these endeavors. We have TGI leadership, data team, safety committee, climate committee, SLP, the school leadership team, programming schedule, school celebrations, and then we have the exciting thing about our committees is this year, staff said, let's have a diversity, equity, and inclusion committee. I think back a few years ago, where we as a whole district said, everybody's going to do this training, everybody in our SAU is going to learn about these topics. And I don't think that was 100% successful. But I think when you have a group of people in your school that say, hey, this is important to our program, we want to take this on, we want to look with this lens at our program and make some suggestions and improvements, I think that's how a little change happens in the school. So I was pleased that we have, I think there are 9 staff members that have signed up to be on that committee to just take that lens and look at what we're doing and make it better. It's exciting. I did give a little explanation about each of the committees at the region. Sure.
Can I ask a question about that?
Yeah.
Because when I clicked on the description for SLT, it said access denied. So I wasn't here last year, so I appreciate the description of that.
Yeah. So SLT is a long-standing Marion Cross school system where there are representatives in each of the different components of the school. The team, the special educators, educational system, and they come together to meet with administration, and they bring things that they think could be better. So they talk to the people in their areas, they talk about any concerns, they bring them to us, and then look to see how we can improve.
Okay, thank you.
And I bet I can change the commitments.
I just sent it to my phone. Okay, great. Thank you very much.
I included our goals, we added a goal, a third goal of public school climate, and that is related to the sort of mindset, what that we did this summer, and we really wanted to grow that piece of our program.
When I have some more to the question, I remember it felt like from the outside that last year there was a lot of kerfuffle about the schedule, right? Is that off to a much smoother start? Did you feel like, hey, people are kind of used to it, we're not going to spend a year getting like, which schedule is what? Yeah, you know what I mean? So is that off to is that a thing for like a better term anymore, or have you settled in on that?
Well, we had a discussion in the staff about that. We tried to determine, do we need that? We spent a lot of time last year. Time well spent. We had a couple of staff members who really experienced that. So we decided this year that it's so far it's working well. People are happy with the schedule. There are nice natural breaks for staff members built in the schedule. There's tons of time to do somewhere. So we have 3 staff members who said we're just on it. So their role in that can be this year. So with some feedback as the year goes on, kind of monitor how things are, and we're under the understanding that we might make some minor changes to the schedule, but overall, we think that we've come up with something that works.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions about anything here or not here?
Okay. Super helpful, all right. Robin?
Hey, I don't have too much to report on, but we did hold our first K-6 meeting today with Mary Cross and the Ray School to look at the science curriculum. We held that here. So we just did an overview of the what's going to take place over the course of the year. We'll be meeting once a month, the first Wednesday of each month on the early release days. And we'll have the team come together, look at our science curriculum, and then we also have 2 full days that we'll spend working on the science curriculum. I do have a consultant coming in that's being paid for through our Title II funds from both schools. I put that in both our grants. So that will be paid for through that. And then today we started by, I developed basically a kind of a long range plan for K through 6. And I put in all of the NGSS, the science standards that are expected to be taught at each grade level. And then we asked the teachers to kind of fill in that chart that I developed with the actual activities and standards that they're covering for each of their grade levels, so that we could look at what's happening not only at each grade level in each school, but we could see if we have, you know, repetition of certain themes or subject areas as we go through each grade level. So I think today was really good. It's been really nice for me actually over the past few years to be at this stage where this isn't something totally new, bringing everyone together. I think people have gotten accustomed to working together and to starting to really align the curriculum and see the benefits of that for kids moving into middle school. So for me, it was really a fun day. It was exciting, and I feel like every year we're just accomplishing more and more. So that will continue throughout the year. And then I have also planned with the principals and all of the leadership team, our K through 12 meetings this year. Those will take place on the 3rd Wednesday of each month, again during the early release days. And again, it's been a fun process. Everyone volunteered to lead. One of the administrators is leading each of the grade level, the subject area teams. So like I'm working with the nurses again. I worked with them for COVID. So I'll meet with them once a month. I can't remember what. Great news science.
Library media.
Yeah, library media for Sean. Counseling. Meeting counseling. So I think, again, it gives us an opportunity to work with a wide variety of groups. We already have the first agenda established for that meeting. It will take place September 20th. And then from there, we'll develop the agendas with the teams. So those are 2 big curriculum pieces happening. Tomorrow, we start our work with the group who is going to work on the supervision and evaluation at Mary Cross. And I sent out a whole slew of items to that group of basically looking at what the work that was done for Hanover and Dresden the past few years, and then looking at what currently exists at Mary Cross, and then just beginning those discussions too. So I'm really excited about that work, having gone through it. previously to do it with Mary Cross as well. And it's nice because, again, we have a lot of systems that we've been putting in place, like Frontline, so we've got all of the current evaluation systems in that program. We've added the EAs this year, we've added administrators. So we're making progress there as well. And then finally, the CFP, which is our grant through the state of Vermont for Titles 1, 2, and Title 4, that was approved. So we're looking at different things like this PD opportunity in science. We're looking at expanding upon what the work that we've already done now. Continuing some work that we've been doing in reading and language arts. And then we are also looking at, we've been able to fund acquisition through that grant. And I think about it, I think I covered most of the piece of that, but it's, you know, it's a significant amount of money. And so hopefully we can spend every last penny of it, which we've been trying to do every year. So, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. Thank you. Yeah, thank you, thank you. Been fun.
Okay. All right, so at our last meeting, we went into executive session to deliberate about the proposed or the tentative review we had with the Norwich Teachers Association, and when we came back out, we voted that contract. And we didn't have a lot of answer. I just wanted to really thank the board's negotiation committee and the Norwich Teachers Association for what was really I thought a very collegial, professional, and really quick negotiation, and I really feel like both sides sort of came to a place where we feel like we get a solid agreement. But I think what's even cooler about that was the fact that we now, even though there's still quite a bit of uncertainty at the state level, the fact that we have a 2-year agreement, I think really helps just give some security and some stability, and sort of take that out of the mix in terms of staff morale. And I'm just really happy that that worked out the way it did. One other thing I want to add is I share Sean's sense about the school year. Robert and I talked about it. There is a palpable difference this year. Just seeing things seem so positive, and I really do think we're off to a really great start. And I haven't really done a lot of reflection or analysis about why that is. It just things seem great, and it's I would knock wood if I had one. The last thing to do is really sort of an SAU thing, but I want to take this opportunity to say farewell to a really important member of our SAU 70 team who decided to pursue another opportunity. Shannon Howe's she's been an invaluable member of our IT department and has served our schools, including Marion Cross, exceptionally well. And she's done everything. She does staff. She does all of our state reporting for both states. In her new role, she'll only have to report for one. Make more money doing it. She's gonna be a rough loss. But I just wanted to just say that we're gonna miss her and really wish her luck in her new position. She's agreed to do some consulting with us in the interim to make sure that we don't lose a skip a beat on that reporting. So we'll continue to stay engaged with her for a while, but she's leaving on great terms, and it's an unfortunate loss for us. So I guess that's really all I have. Again, my thanks to everyone for such a great, it was a ton of work, and that's another reason why we're having a great start to the school year, is because everything all of you did to get us ready. So thanks.
Any comments or questions? Jamie, feel free to keep your report short tonight if you want. Since you seem like you've already reported most of your items earlier this meeting, but not sure if you have.
How are you? So just a quick update on a few of my departments for you. Food service, the new dishwasher, I think is going to be delivered this Friday. And I think there are parts of it that, that hook on that are coming in tomorrow, Friday and Monday, which I've sent the administration there all of the information to track it so they're not surprised. We're discussing the best idea and placement for tables. So we'll probably have an update on that shortly. The playground, there's 2 pieces of equipment on order that are called rocket tunnels. They are pieces of equipment that will be placed up in the new equipment area, playground area. But for now, we thought we would try to bring them in early so that we could place them down outside of where you're sitting, actually outside of the pre-care area, outside of the library there where we have that void. They're easy to set in place and relatively, I say easy, I'm not doing it, but relatively easy to move as well. So I don't have a date on delivery yet. I was hoping to get it today, but I haven't gotten the email back. So we'll keep you posted on that one. Let's see what else is going on. So that's, we've been working in finance to get everybody set up and paid. We ran our first big payrolls of the year with all the new employees and all the employees back. I believe it went well. I want to thank Heather Anderson. Without her, we would be dead in the water. She's an amazing employee and she put in 1 million hours getting everything ready to go. With help from Amy and myself. We did the background work and then Heather dove in and really carried the ball across the finish line. So kudos to her and her team, and thanks to Amy Tallman and Bridget and everybody else who had a hand in that. So hopefully everybody will get paid on Friday. And we're praying that it's, at least 99% correct. If not, we'll fix it. No worries. We have been busy in maintenance. Like Sean said, I think he probably reported on all the different things that have been going on in the school there, which it looks great. And I hope everybody's happy with some of the changes that were affected. And busing. How could we miss busing? Wow, what a busy beginning of the year. Our buses are full. I think I reported on this 2 weeks ago when we had a meeting then. They're being well utilized. Our assets are being well utilized, and that's a great thing. So we're not running buses half full and adding to the carbon footprint for no reason. We do have some folks that have been asking for some special drop-offs, and as in the past years, we'll accommodate them when and where we can, as long as there's room on the buses for the regular riders to get to and from their homes. And so I know Joy in the front office, thank you, Joy, has been helping out with that, chasing down whether or not there's room and giving folks, answers and or passes for special trips. So, yep, transportation, finance, we're wrapping up a lot of the reports for the end of the fiscal year for the state of Vermont, and food service, we got all of our NSLP paperwork and filings done and reports in. The application's been approved, so we can start filing claims. I will be sending out letters to anybody who fell under the direct certification to inform them. I need to get those out this week. I followed up with Immersion Montessori about the contract for this year for 23-24, and they should be signing that and getting that back to us shortly. I will have a meeting with the town here shortly. I reached out to them about having a meeting with the Public Works Director and the town manager so we can get ahead of the winter routes and what's needed. To be sure we're all on the same page, and also to set up a formal meeting with them to come to some kind of agreement on a payment schedule. I know Tom tried to do that, get that done last year, and we just didn't, with everything happening in finance and being shorthanded, we just didn't have time to put that together. We've also been working through the support staff agreement with the folks from the union there. And so hope to bring some information back to you at some point in time. And that's about it, I guess, for us.
How did it go with the later tax payment date from Norwich?
What's that, Lily?
How did the later tax payment due date from Norwich affect you guys in the end, or what happened?
It will be close.
Okay.
This year, we're okay because we have the proceeds of the 2 loan payments in the bank. But I think we really need to come to an agreement on at least getting a partial payment at some point near around late August, mid to late August. So I think we'll be okay because they're meeting tonight, correct?
Yes.
Should do, and then what's your, and the chance of getting these, a couple of these structures in? I know we've got a lot of parent questions, so that's pretty doable, we think. I don't want to overpromise or start spreading rumors. A couple of the playground structures.
I don't have a date. I've ordered them. So as soon as I have a date.
2 of those set up, that seems pretty viable to get one of those, a couple of them set up down here.
Yes, as long as it doesn't snow, hopefully before normal times. Yep,
Okay. Awesome.
that's the plan. And I think
And-
Sean was meeting with folks today about maybe some other plans. I'm not sure because Tony mentioned that to me about, you know, some potential other items. I'm not sure how that came out.
Yes.
Sorry.
Oh, and it's starting the trail. The trail will start the second part of phase 2 of the trail. We initiated that contract and Russell should be in there within the next 2 weeks.
Just a quick question for everybody. Based upon Jamie's reaction to Lily's question that we were okay this year because we had money in the bank. And some suggestion that we get a partial payment and Lily sort of shaking her head that yeah, that doesn't, it doesn't feel like that's something we can count on. I mean, it seems like it might be easy, but maybe we could count on it. My question is, do we need to go back to the town and ask them to move it back to August 15th, just to avoid anybody having a nervous stomach?
I think we should probably have a discussion with the new finance folks and the town manager, and then we can probably evaluate that. We have some time, Lisa, to have the discussions maybe, and then depending on how that comes out, that might be a possibility. You're also, as the school board members, you're given the authority if we had to borrow, you know, to do a TAN. We could, but you know, we don't want to do that, obviously.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. I just, because it would have to be a warrant article to switch it back, right? Because we voted on it. We voted on it to switch it, so we have to have another one to switch it back. Okay, thank you. I just wanted to have it on our radar. We needed to have that conversation sooner rather than later.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but my state part, I'm not kind of like a partial
Yeah.
tax question payment, like, most people pay their taxes by, what did they do, have them in by?
August 30th was the tax due date this year.
Right. 80-50.
So I think Jamie's saying if we get a partial payment on September 1st, that would work, right? Like.
I don't know. The finance department.
Cash my check pretty quick, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, mine too.
I guess the one question I have for Jamie is, have we ever in the past had a tax anticipation note and we engaged that in borrowing?
Not in my 8 years of being here.
I know
So-
some people-
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. The other thing I would note is that I had a thought. Hold on. It might come back to me. I hate that when that happens. Never mind. I don't know what I was going to say. I'm good.
If the school board feels strongly about this, you can petition them to have this put on.
Right.
Right.
That's just what I was-
You can circumvent the select board.
Well, let's see what happens. And we'll know by how many get we like us to.
So I
Yes.
remember, sorry, I remember what I was gonna say. So when I had initially emailed over to ask them about a partial payment, it wasn't that the idea was not well received. It was that there was some folks that were on vacation. So in order to follow through on the process would have been difficult. So I think if we can have a conversation about it, that we may be able to make some progress.
Great. All right, thank you, Jane, for everything.
I don't know these are-
No need for it, but yeah, need for executive session. Okay. I think we're back in our meeting. I was gonna ask Matt to have, out of high school. With walkers, eat up. He left. So anyways. Oh, 7:00. Agenda talks next meeting, yeah, to me, and at this point,
One that I do know, we need to have official board decisions on the VSBA resolution. Again, we usually actually would be the last time.
how would the resolution call tomorrow and actually present them? Is that how?
Tomorrow's is just presentation, so that board members know what they'll be voting on at the annual meeting. The actual voting happens at the annual conference.
So we need to.
And so we get one vote, we, the board, gets one vote, and whoever your delegate is, that goes to that meeting needs to know how to cast that vote for the resolutions that will be coming up.
Okay. Okay,
I can help you through with that in the agenda.
all right. Then motion to adjourn. Well,
Adjourn at 9:00 p.m.
20 minutes late. All those in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, it's.